This volume of Berserk, volume 34, a very, very deep volume, depending on how you look at it. If you have seen the foreshadowing and understood the complexity of the astral worlds and the God Hand and so forth and so on, this volume is monumental, and it is a main key turning point in the Berserk series. It is probably one of the most plot-heavy volumes without dialogue. Looking at it as an outsider's perspective, this volume is very, very simple. Just straight up very simple. Because about 75% of this volume is fighting. Demons versus demons. Demons and humans working together to face humans. And that is 75% of the volume. And it's very monumental. It's a monumental moment of Berserk to see demons and humans, or apostles and humans, work together against some unholy abominations. And to see how humanity worked with apostles and apostles worked with humans, that was a major key turning point of the Berserk universe. Because since the very beginning, since Volume 1, since Volume 2, 3, so forth, so on, you understand where I'm going at, it's always been showcased that apostles are monstrosities. They are beings they cannot feel used to human emotions. They really hate humanity, and they, devour them. They don't care much for humanity at all. They just, have their own self-importance where they care about only for themselves. And to see how they were willingly helping out humanity without being forced is intriguing. But it goes further than that. The main reason you could say how these apostles are helping humanity is because of the shining light of the hawk that will change the world. And this is where the plot of Berserk Volume 34 really showcases. Now, I went back to read old volumes on my shelf because I was wanting to make sure I understood the complexity of what this volume really meant properly. So I went back to read a couple volumes yesterday. I went back to read Volume 10 and 11, I went back to, the Knight of Skeleton when he actually talked to Guts a long time ago, and he was talking about how the God Hand are on a different plane of existence, and, now we know that's the astral layers. Pretty much he talked about how the God Hand were on a different plane of existence because their power was just so immense they couldn't come into the actual physical realm. And I remember the Knight of Skeleton actually discussing somewhat of this and hinting at it to Guts. And then when we get to Volume 24 and 25, we found out about the astral layers and different things about that, like the abyss and stuff like that, and we found out there might be something deep down in the dark abyss that pretty much represents the idea of evil. Since we all know that the idea of evil is kind of not canon but canon at the exact same time, we do know that there is some form of demon or somewhere in the dark abyss that is controlling everything. We know that for a fact. It's obvious. It's already been hinted at past the idea of evil chapter, and so we still don't know exactly what it is, but we can kind of assume that it controls destiny. Now here's the thing. This volume of Berserk, it pretty much can only be understood if you really have the understanding of the Berserk universe. If you really understand the complexity of the astral layers and the meaning behind the God Hand and stuff like that, that is how you truly appreciate what this volume stands for. This volume, at first glance, from a casual reader of Berserk's perspective, it would look like it's nothing but art fangasms all over the place. The art is ridiculous, but Kentaro is able to tell a story with his art alone. And that is a very hard thing to do when it comes to different series, written series, literature, or anything, to be able to express a story just through art alone. And majority of this volume represents that. And Kentaro did a damn good job representing his story through artwork, the fighting and all that, the brilliance of it. And a lot of shonen manga actually failed to do stuff like this. And Kentaro succeeded in beating shonen manga when it comes to the formula of telling a story along fighting. And that right there is why Berserk is so beautiful, and why I love the twisted story and tragedy of Berserk. But getting into the details, getting back on topic to Volume 24 and 25 and Volume 10 and 11 and then Volume 17. Pretty much, we found out about the astral layers. And I remember in my video, you can go back and check for yourself, I remember on Volume 25 review, I stated my theory that maybe the God Hand or the idea of evil, or the version of idea of evil that's now kind of considered canon, is kind of, actually, they made the Holy See to where humanity will turn against, regular creatures like fairies and stuff. They'll cast aside olden gods because it'll allow the God Hand to flourish, where the God Hand could come back, they could cause the root of evil, like mock eclipse and stuff like that. They pretty much designed all the stuff when it came to the Holy See and everything when it came up to the reincarnation of Griffith and all that type of stuff. And it's pretty much been told that kind of stuff has happened, and if you start looking into the deep, universe of Berserk, you find out that why would the God Hand, or why would Griffith, come out? Like, why would Griffith come out into the real world? I mean, we know he wants to have a kingdom, a castle in the sky. He wants that shining light he's always reached for and he's always trying to strive to get. But let's think about this in a different perspective. What's the real goal of the God Hand? Like, what does the person that made Griffith who he was, what does he want? And looking at this volume, it's a major turning point because the astral layers, from what I could see at the end of the volume, has fused into one. Because you see unicorns, hydras, imps, you see harpies, yetis, you see goblins, you see dragons, you see all sorts of crazy things, and at the end of the volume, you see all the God Hand, you see, them all popping up in their own plane of existence or being able to leave, and so it shows you the God Hand are now able to walk some form of the earth. And that pretty much confirms my theory I had on volume 25. The God Hand, with, how the astral layers were kind of spreading all over the world, and you saw how it was, like, slowly being corrupted, like you saw the astral layers leaking onto the physical realm. Well, with the volume, it's like Griffith actually sped up the process, so let's dive into that real quick. So, the main thing you can get from this is Griffith, in the entire act of what he did in this volume, when he kind of opened up this, like, freaking abyssal rift to the astral layers, when, the skeleton knight, slashed down at him, and Griffith manipulated that astral layer type, portal thing, when he actually moved that, it opened up this, like, portal thing on top of the Emperor on his entire head and opened it up. Griffith was actually speeding up the process of the world changing. Like, it was already kind of obvious by now, since volume 21 and 22, since Griffith's return, that the world was changing. It was even stated by Kentaro himself. I remember the narrations in that when Griffith, returned, and he saw Zod and all that, and Griffith, flying over the forest. It was stated that the world is changing, spirits are restless, and stuff like that. And we've already seen demonstrations of this in earlier volumes, like volume 26, 25, 24. We saw how the astral layers were slowly spreading into the physical realm, like goblins attacking people and stuff like that. And so Griffith already distorted the world. He already distorted the astral layers when he got reborn into the world, but it was slowly changing. But Griffith, he sped up the process. Like, the world would have changed eventually, from what I understood. Like, the way the world was changing already, it would have eventually, maybe hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, the world might have been changed. But Griffith sped up that process with what he did in this volume. And now, here's the thing. With this volume, it makes me question a lot of things. We do know that something governs destiny and fate. We know that. That's been one of the main central reoccurring themes in Berserk. It always is. And Guts, curses his destiny, his fate, and he goes against it. He will battle gods himself and kill them and slay them just to exact his vengeance, pretty much. His war declaration. And this reoccurring theme, as we know, it's always been governed by fate. And we even saw how, like, the God Hand and fate and stuff was showcased in the Tower of Conviction arc. And with this, with how the Knight of Skeleton was kind of used like a fiddle, like he was literally used to open up the Emperor to release this astral layer energy from the abyss to spread all over the world, like the entire planet gets encompassed in this astral layer energy and the world fuse into one. Now, it necessarily isn't stated how many layers are fused into one. I highly doubt the deepest, darkest layers are actually fused into the real world, but I'm willing to bet it's a lot easier to reach those depths now. Probably it's a lot easier for the God Hand to materialize now in the physical realm because of the act of what Griffith did in the volume. But let's get into the actual details. The Knight of Skeleton, he was used. And he's been for thousands of years, like, not thousands, 1,000 years or even hundreds of years, he's been eating behemoths, making this behemoth sword where he can cut through the astral layers and seal off the God Hand and stuff like that. That's what his overall goal was. He made that sword to combat the God Hand. That was his goal. And the thing was, Griffith used it. He used that sword, he used the Knight of Skeleton to accomplish his goals. Now, it's already kind of been assumed and hinted at in these past couple volumes that Griffith can see the future, or somewhat of the future. He could see slightly what is going to happen, because it was already showcased in Volume 32 that he knew what the Emperor was going to do all along. Like, he knew the Emperor would, you know, kind of backway retreat. He let the Emperor leave just before he can get that entire chance with the Knight of Skeleton to cut him down. It was very obvious that Griffith could actually see stuff like this. I mean, he even showcased about how the wind would come through and blow away the Emperor's, you know, like, magic, and everybody would die, and the Emperor, you know, transform. He even hinted at that. And so Griffith can kind of see the destiny and future of different things. And so that makes me question, how long has Griffith known, or I mean, has he known since the very first time he became a God Hand? Did he know what the Knight of Skeleton was trying to accomplish? Because here's the thing. If there is something that governs fate and destiny in the abyss, the deep dark abyss, whatever that thing is, okay, God, fate God, whatever it is, if it does, you're telling me that the Knight of Skeleton was used since the very beginning. He's been used and played with to cause this very moment to where whatever's probably in the abyss can escape. That's pretty fucked up. That is really fucked up. So the Knight of Skeleton, even though he's had all this talk to Guts, he talked about how you can't escape fate and stuff like this, and he's tried his own ways to fight against fate, you know, making this behemoth sword, he pretty much was being used the entire time by the God Hand. It's very sad and tragic if you think about it like that. It's kind of fucked up. But the things are, with this, does this mean that we are going to see how the God Hand could possibly be defeated? Because I remember in the course of the journey of Berserk, it was stated that not any normal means can really affect, you know, the God Hand, like normal weapons and stuff like that, because they are in a different existence. They're on a plane of existence, or really high up there in status, and so normal means cannot really affect the God Hand. And so I wonder now, since they became more mortal, like, you know, the God Hand are now in the physical realm, and everything is fused into one, I wonder if it's now possible the God Hand can be killed a lot easier now, because they're on the plane of existence where they are. But that is my theory right there. Here's the thing, though. What is the real endgame of the series? That's the question, too. Like, all the villains have some form of endgame. And I believe what is ever in the abyss that governs fate and destiny has made the behemoths and stuff like that, wants to escape from the abyss, get into the real world, and be free. Okay? That's my theory right there. But the other thing is, too, like, what really happened in that act? Like, what happened to when that power gushed forth from the Emperor? What was that? That's something I do want to dive into. So my assumption of what that power meant is actually the Emperor's power. Let me explain. So I went back, as I said, multiple volumes ago. I went back to the Tower Conviction arc. I went back to, you know, volume 10 and 11. I went back to the Knight of Skeleton when he talked about, you know, Griffith to Guts, about how he was on a different plane of existence and stuff like that, and their power couldn't come to the real world because they were just so strong. I'm going to assume that the Emperor was kind of the exact same way. Since he was reincarnated a second time, he had this unbelievable power. And with this unbelievable power, it caused it to where he was in madness. He was in darkness. He couldn't see. Like, he couldn't see anything. And the only light he could see was Griffith. And the thing is with this madness, he couldn't control his own powers because it was just so strong. He was like God Hand level. But here's the thing, though. With this great power, he couldn't actually bring all that power into the mortal realm, from what I understood, because it was just so strong. And in the act of doing this, Griffith, he used the Knight of Skeleton to cut a hole into the Emperor straight to the astral world, like the realm, the lowest, deepest realm, the dark abyss, to release all that energy from the Emperor into the world. That's what I'm assuming, because when you see that explosion coming out of the Emperor, I'm assuming that's the magic he had and the, you know, the spiritual pressure and stuff like he had inside of him that just exploded out of him. And that was why the, spirit tree or whatever, that world tree or thing at the end of the volume represents. Like, he just exploded with power, and the abyss leaked out of it. Like, it couldn't hold all that power. So, that's pretty much my thoughts on the volume. It really is. It's a very short, like, simple volume. I mean, it's very deep. It is a deep volume, but that's pretty much it. So, besides the Emperor and his backstory being poisoned and how he became, you know, an apostle and stuff like that, which was really intriguing, by the way, the main things you could take from it is that he was once again used by destiny and fate to accomplish the in-game goals of the God Hand. So how do you feel about this volume? How do you feel about the astral layers fusing into one? How do you feel about the God Hand being set free on the world, humanity's end? Like, do you really believe humanity can fight against this? Like, let's be real here. Humanity is fucked. The God Hand walked the earth. Dragons, yetis, goblins, unicorns, hydras, harpies. All these mythological creatures roaming the planet. Humanity is fucked. And humanity is no longer the reigning champion on the food chain when it comes to the planet. It was already bad enough with apostles. But now adding on these different creatures and monsters and monstrosities, it wouldn't surprise me to see humanity die at the end of the series. Because this is a very dark series. It is. And so I wonder what's going to happen. I really do. So tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.